You know what amazes me? It's when some people come here and then they'll tell you that no, Christianity came to Africa because of colonialism. People speak about how if it wasn't for colonialism and slave trade, transatlantic slave trade, Christianity wouldn't have made it through Africa or to Africa. I think I always make mention of the fact that if colonialism hadn't happened, Christianity still would have made it into the continent and the context of Africa. I think most of us tend to think that Africans were an afterthought to God, but I beg to differ. And Africans definitely weren't an afterthought to God. In fact, many of the church leading theologians came from Africa. And most of you are well familiar with the term Trinity, where we Christians believe that our God is a Trinitarian God that exists as three in one. And something that you might not be aware of is that an African theologian actually coined that term Trinity. If you've heard about Tertullian, most of you have probably heard about him, and one of those early century Christians that contributed to the spread of Christianity within the context of Africa. And Tertullian coined this term. And you'd find that there's also other theologians that were of African descent that contributed to the early development and growth of Christianity and the theology that we hold today. And if you've heard about Athanasius, he was from Egypt, and he was also a leading defender of the Trinity, and he was actually also labeled by his enemies as a black dwarf. You've probably heard about that guy that was like dark-skinned and short, at least within the history of theologians and all those people. You could also have possibly heard about Augustine. Augustine is one of the philosophers that had a very, very large influence on subsequent Western Christianity that we have currently, and he was originally African. Everyone is fully aware of the Ethiopian Christian church that predates colonialism. Because if you do not know, I don't know what you're doing with your deconstructionism, but by now you should know that there is Christianity that predates colonialism in Ethiopia, and one of the key members of that Christian foundations is Aksum of Ethiopia, and that is around 333 AD, and he converted through a witness or through witnesses of Syrian descent. So these are some of the things that we do recognize that speak into Christianity pre-existing colonialism and what impact African theologians had on Christianity. Just in case you still have a shadow of doubt, or you still require a little bit more convincing, let me give you a fun fact. Did you know that the East African Empire, that is, if you know about it, converted to Christianity way before the Roman Empire? Did you know that? That's something that you can actually look up and confirm, something that is very easily verifiable. So for those that tend to be misinformed about Christianity within the context of Africa, that could actually come in handy if you look into it. And maybe for your further reading and further study, you could look into these African prophets, African Christian prophets that were largely opposed by colonialists, probably or in part due to their faith in Christ. And these were West African prophets. One of them is Prophet Garrick Sokari Braid. You can look into him, Braid. You could also look into William Wade Harris. You can then also look into Simon Kibamgu. You could also look into that. And what's funny is that colonial authorities often hampered indigenous church and missions. So don't be uninformed about Christianity within the context of Africa. Please take your time, study. The Bible tells us to study and be ye approved. Look it up. Don't believe what the internet tells you. Don't believe what deconstructionists tell you. Look into it yourself and you'll be blessed. God bless. Have a lovely one.